The signal stopped repeating 37 hours ago, and we still don't know what it means by end. Dr. Sarah Chen hasn't left the observation deck since the translation finished, just standing there with her reflection ghosted against the void between galaxies, staring at the numbers counting down on every screen like they might change if she watches hard enough. I can see her from where I'm sitting in the comm station, and I know she's thinking the same thing I am. That something about the silence after the message is worse than the message itself. The signal came from a point in space where nothing should exist, a coordinate so perfectly centered between Andromeda and the Milky Way that our initial assumption was equipment failure, some kind of cosmic echo bouncing back from our own transmissions. But signals don't translate themselves into 23 Earth languages simultaneously, and they don't carry chronological data that matches our timekeeping systems despite originating from a civilization that should have no concept of human seconds, minutes, hours. The translation was clinical, almost bored, universal cascade failure in 48 hours. This is not a warning. This is a notification. Evacuation impossible. Survival probability 0. Do not attempt to understand. Do not attempt to prevent. Then nothing. No explanation of what would cascade, no description of the mechanism, no instructions, no follow-up, just that flat declaration and then silence spreading back out into the darkness between galaxies like the universe itself had finished speaking and moved on. We tried everything in the first 12 hours. Every government on Earth, every space agency, every university with a radio telescope pointed at that empty coordinate, searching for more information, some elaboration, some reason to believe it was a hoax or a test or a miscalculation. But the signal's origin point was impossible to fake. The interferometric data showed it coming from a physical source, something massive and ancient, at least 2 million light-years away but somehow transmitting in real time, bypassing every known law about information transfer and light speed limits. The astrophysics teams worked through the night running simulations, trying to model what a universal cascade failure could even mean, whether it was structural collapse of spacetime, vacuum decay, false vacuum destabilization, heat death acceleration, something we hadn't even theorized yet. Every model came back inconclusive because we didn't know what we were modeling. We were trying to predict the mechanics of our own extinction using physics that apparently didn't apply anymore, or maybe never applied, maybe we'd been working with incomplete equations this whole time and something out there knew it. Sarah pulled me aside around hour 15 and said something I haven't been able to stop thinking about. She said that the mathematical structure of the signal, the way it encoded itself, suggested the sender knew exactly how human cognition worked, how we process sequential information, how we build meaning from patterns. "They're not talking to us," she said, her voice barely above a whisper even though we were alone. "They're filling out a form. We're being logged." The panic started slowly, then everywhere at once. First the conspiracy theorists, then the religious movements, then governments trying to maintain order while simultaneously preparing for something they couldn't name or defend against, then just chaos, riots, martial law in some cities, complete social collapse in others, people deciding that if they had 48 hours they'd spend it with family or looting or praying or getting high or just screaming. Up here on the International Deep Space Observatory, we were insulated from most of it, watching Earth turn through cycles of day and night like it always had, cities glowing and dimming, weather patterns swirling, everything looking so normal it felt obscene. We kept working because there was nothing else to do, kept scanning that coordinate, kept running analyses, kept hoping for something that would make sense of the notification. Dar. Petrov suggested it might be a test of some kind, a simulation of a disaster to observe how civilizations respond to existential information, but that felt like hope dressed up as hypothesis, and nobody challenged him on it because we all wanted it to be true. Then at hour 24, exactly halfway through our countdown, something changed. The signal returned, but different. Not a message this time, just data. Raw observational data about our solar system, our planet, atmospheric composition, tectonic activity, ocean currents, population distribution, energy consumption, patterns of light and heat and electromagnetic radiation, everything you'd need to build a complete profile of a living world. And it was updating in real time, streaming from that same impossible source, which meant they were watching us right now, had always been watching us, were cataloging us while we died. Sarah broke down then, really broke, not crying but laughing, this awful hollow sound that made everyone in the observation deck stop what they were doing. "They're not warning us," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "They're recording us. We're data. We're specimens in a closing exhibit." Someone tried to calm her down, but she pushed them away, pulled up the data stream on the main display, started pointing at the patterns. "Look at the timestamp encoding. This isn't being sent from 2 million light-years away right now. This was sent 2 million years ago. The signal left its source when our ancestors were barely using stone tools, and it's been traveling through empty space this whole time, carrying a message about our end, programmed to arrive exactly 48 hours before it happens." They knew. Whoever sent this knew exactly when we developed the technology to receive it, knew exactly when we'd be watching the sky, knew exactly when the universe would end, and they timed the notification to arrive just before it happened. Not to save us. Just to inform us. Just to make sure we knew someone was keeping track. The mathematics supported her completely, and that's when the real horror set in. Not the fear of death but the understanding of what the signal implied about causality, about time, about whether anything we'd ever done mattered if something could send a message backward through time with the precision of a countdown timer. I started wondering if the cascade failure was natural or triggered, if maybe the act of sending the notification was itself part of the mechanism, a signal so massive and reality-breaking that it destabilized something fundamental, a message that created its own truth by being sent. Petrov suggested we try to respond, send our own signal back along the same vector, tell whoever or whatever was out there that we received their notification, that we existed, that we wanted to understand. We debated it for 3 hours while the countdown ticked through hour 30, hour 31, hour 32, everyone knowing it was pointless but desperate for any action that felt like agency. In the end we sent it, a compressed data package containing everything we could think of, our history, our art, our mathematics, our music, our genome, our philosophies, our mistakes, our hopes, everything we were or had been, transmitted toward that empty coordinate at maximum power, pouring every what we could generate into a message that would take 2 million years to arrive, if it arrived at all, if there was anything left to receive it. The response came back in 47 seconds. Not 2 million years. 47 seconds. The same clinical tone, the same perfect translation, acknowledgement received. Data unnecessary. Profile complete. Observation concluded. And then, underneath, something that wasn't part of the original notification structure, something that felt added, almost like an afterthought, or maybe like something that had been there all along but only revealed itself when we tried to make contact. You are the 47th iteration. Each instance believes itself to be the first. The cascade is cyclical. Evacuation remains impossible. Understanding changes nothing. Thank you for participating. The observation deck went completely silent. Someone made a sound like they were going to be sick. I watched the countdown reach hour 36 and felt something break inside my head, some fundamental assumption about linear time and unique existence, because if we were the 47th iteration that meant this had happened before, would happen again, was maybe happening simultaneously in parallel versions of now, and the signal wasn't warning us about an ending but documenting a cycle we'd been caught in from the beginning. From before the beginning, from whenever this pattern started. Running. Sarah pulled up historical data, started cross-referencing archaeological records, geological patterns, mass extinction events, trying to find evidence of previous iterations, but what would that even look like? How would you prove that reality had reset 46 times before if each reset was complete enough that no trace survived except maybe in the structure of the signal itself? In the fact that someone was counting, keeping track, numbering us like experiments in a series. We spent the next 6 hours arguing about what it meant, whether we were simulations being run and rerun, whether the universe was actually ending or just our particular instance of it, whether the cascade was a natural cosmic event or something deliberate, a harvest, a recycling, a process we couldn't comprehend because we were on the wrong side of it. Every theory led back to the same terrible conclusion. That we were being observed by something that existed outside our framework of time, something that could watch the universe end and begin again, something that numbered iterations and sent notifications and collected data about each cycle with the detached efficiency of a scientist recording experimental results. At hour 42, the data stream changed again. This time it wasn't observations of Earth. It was observations of other worlds, hundreds of them, thousands, each one tagged with a number, each one showing a civilization at the moment they received their own notification, some primitive, some advanced, some biological, some digital, some forms we couldn't even classify, and every single one showing the same pattern of confusion, panic, desperate analysis, attempts at response, acceptance, and then termination. We were watching a compilation of endings, a highlight reel of civilizations learning they had 48 hours left, and the timestamp on each one was staggered, centuries apart, millennia apart, but all converging toward the same moment, all being shown to us now like we were supposed to understand something from the pattern. Sarah zoomed in on iteration 46, the one immediately before us, and found a civilization that looked almost human, close enough that it was disturbing, using technology that resembled ours, sending a final message that our translation algorithms rendered as, "We understand now." The cycle requires observation. Consciousness is the mechanism. Then their feed cut to static, and we knew we were watching what would happen to us in 6 hours. The question nobody wanted to ask but everyone was thinking was whether knowing changed anything, whether being the 47th instead of the first meant we had some advantage, some insight the previous iterations lacked, or whether that was the trap itself, the assumption that awareness mattered, that understanding the cycle gave us power over it. I kept thinking about what iteration 46 had said, that consciousness was the mechanism, and I wondered if they meant that the cascade needed observers to happen, if maybe the universe was ending specifically because we were watching it end, because the act of receiving the notification and understanding it somehow triggered the failure, made it real through observation in some quantum way we'd barely theorized about. Or maybe they meant something worse. Maybe they meant consciousness was what was being harvested, that the cycle existed to generate awareness and then collect it, that we were farming ourselves without knowing it, cultivating the capacity to understand our own ending so that the ending meant something, carried information, fed whatever was running this process. At hour 45, Sarah asked me if I thought any of it was real. Not the signal, not the countdown, but everything before it, our lives, our choices, our history, whether any of that had happened or if it was all constructed background for this moment, these 48 hours, this experiment or observation or whatever it was. I couldn't answer her. The possibility that everything I remembered was false, implanted, generated as set dressing for a notification event was somehow more disturbing than the certainty of ending. We sat together and watched Earth turn, watched the lights of cities we'd never visit, watched storms form and dissipate, watched the sun rise over oceans that would be gone soon, and I thought about all the people down there who'd given up trying to understand and were just existing in their final hours, holding each other, saying goodbye, making peace or refusing to, and I envied them their ignorance, their ability to treat this as a simple ending instead of a revelation about the structure of everything. At hour 47, the countdown stopped displaying time. The screens just showed a single word in every language, observing. Present tense. Continuous. Like whatever was coming wasn't a sudden event but a process that required witness, required us to be conscious and aware for it to complete. Sarah reached out and took my hand, and we stood there together in the observation deck surrounded by equipment that would never matter again, looking out at the space between galaxies where something ancient and incomprehensible had sent a notification across 2 million years just to make sure we knew we were number 47 in a series we'd never escape. The last thing I remember thinking before the cascade began was that somewhere, in whatever framework existed outside our reality, someone was taking notes, marking us complete, moving on to iteration 48, and that they'd do this forever, or what passed for forever in a cycle that had no beginning we could trace and no ending we could survive, just this eternal return of consciousness, learning it was temporary, learning it was numbered, learning that understanding changes nothing except the quality of the ending itself.